Hello there, and welcome to my little arty corner of YouTube. My name's Angela Porter. I'm an artist and I'm probably best known for my adult colouring books in the Colour Me series with Lacey Mucklow, who's an art therapist, and also plenty of books in the Creative Haven series from Dover, including Insanely Intricate Entangled Landscapes, I think Insanely Intricate, something like that, and all kinds of things. My last one was Adorable Dogs, and before that is Whimsical Cats. So loads. And other publishing companies I've done work for as well in the past. But I'm here because my YouTube mission, I think, mostly is to encourage you to pick up pen and paper, your colouring media of your choice, and just draw for pleasure, with no expectations on yourself other than you're going to have a relaxing and enjoyable time. And I'll help you do this through giving you hints and tips and showing you step by step some of my favourite motifs and patterns, and I'll break them down one step at a time. And I make absolute disasters myself. Sometimes I go, what on earth was I thinking? There's a very good example here, this one. Over the top with pattern. I just got carried away with filling in these sections with circles and I just compounded it. It could be interesting. I may look back on it in time and think, actually, I wasn't too bad an idea, but at the moment, I'm not very happy. And I drew these in the previous video. I'll try to remember to put a link below. But I did finish adding colour and texture away from the camera because it took an age yesterday for the video to upload to YouTube and be processed. And I don't like to leave it alone or put my attention too far elsewhere in case something goes wrong, because you just never know. So we're going to carry on with some drawing today with some sea plants or creatures or alien things. These could look like seed pods that you might find at the bottom of an ocean or in a strange alien garden or a whimsical garden, or they could almost be sea urchins in some way as well. So I've got a selection of pens with me today, as always, and I've got a collection of alcohol markers, which are soft blues, bluey purpley lilacs, and bluey greens. So I'm keeping things to a limited colour palette, and I'm keeping them what we call analogous colours. And analogous colours are next to each other on the colour wheel, so they're not too far apart. They always work well together. And it's unusual for me to use them because I tend to go towards things that are more complementary colours, which are on the opposite side because they make each other become more vibrant. These are mainly analogous because we go from yellow, sort of like orangey colours, to yellows to greens, so they're close together. But one of the colours I used here was more of a red, so we've got a bit of complementary going on there. Anyway, let's have a look. I am going to give myself some land here to draw things from, and if you want a little story, it's just the flat bottom of an ocean bed or a lake bed or some other body of water, because, well, why not? Okay, and I'm going to turn this so it's easy for me to draw these shapes. Don't be afraid of turning your paper, your sketchbook, to make it easy to draw. And I'm going to draw some plants that, to begin with, are this kind of shape. Like this. I'll add some embellishments afterwards, so I suppose it's kind of a spoon shape, isn't it? Well, that's another shape to add to my list of shapes in my Zibaldoni. I'll add a couple behind because I rather want them in a cluster, because I don't think these would actually be happy growing by themselves in the ocean. I think they want company. And we can add pattern and texture to them in different ways as well, because they may be parts of the similar family, but not identical. Perhaps they cohabitate. There we are, so I've got 5 there. And if it's a bit wonky, it's not important. Sketchbook, I'll say that. I'll come back and fill those in with pattern in a moment, I think. And I am going to draw some others here, but instead of having quite a narrow end here, I'm going to draw them a bit broader at the base. And perhaps have them in slightly different heights, because that adds some interest. And let's see what we can do with those. And then perhaps have ones that are leaf shaped almost, but perhaps they sprout off each other or grow in this kind of manner instead of individually. And yeah, I've got some weird shapes here, so what I do is I just fill them with black and perhaps pop a tiny one here, and then perhaps add some others here so that we can do something with them. It's quite nice to start with a whole range of just simple shapes and then see what we can do with them. I may just add a couple more of this kind of shape here, and perhaps a teeny tiny one. Well, because why not? So the ones with the wider bases. Am I going to swap pen? That's probably not. Okay, so there are lots of things we can do with these. I do like to stripe them horizontally, but these aren't straight lines, they are curving down a little bit towards the bottom, because that will add that sense of dimension. And the more that we curve them, the greater that feeling of dimension. And I'm going to put a narrow band there so I can separate that from here. I'm just going to use my pen just to thicken that side of this motif, and I'm going to do the same here. Because it does give some, that added weight just on one side just gives that suggestion that we might have something that has a bit of volume to it. It's the shadows and colours we add that really bring that to life though, I think. Though I do like to start with thick lines. It comes from my days of doing an awful lot more work where I use just line to create drawings. Okay, let's have a look at perhaps doing this in a slightly different way. So let's have wide bands with some narrow bands in between. Because they don't always have to be equidistant to work. So that's quite fun. This one, I think I'm going to pop that kind of line there. Just going to move my paper around because I want to pop perhaps a circle, a circular shape at the top, or semicircular, or whatever we want to call it. And I'm going to double that one simply because I have a bit of a thing about having borders. And then from the bottom here, I'm going to draw lines up to this. And I'm going to think about how these would curve in a way that it respects the curve of the outside edge. So I like that. It's a different way of adding lines. And I am going to just pop in some of these, that extra border there. And I'm tidying lines up as I go. Can have stripes. I'm sure there are plenty of other stripes we could have, but we could also pop in here another favourite way for me to fill shapes with pattern. are dots, which could be holes or dips, or they could be domes, little domes that stick up. So I'll put some others on this side so we can have a look how we can make that illusion of whether they're dipping inwards or they're sticking outwards above. And with this one, I'm going to help that suggestion that these are sticking out by adding some around the edge that we can just see partly to the other side of this. So that's quite fun. So before I go on to the others, let's have a look at adding some shadow and highlight. Now for shadow, I've got cool greys here. I've got a very, very pale one, and I've got one that's a fair bit darker, but I'm okay with that. And I'm going to pop my shadows towards the left-hand side of the shape, like this. And oh, that was the darker colour, so that's okay. I can live with that. It's a wider shadow than I wanted, but perhaps that's the way it's going to be. And on this side, there would have been a shadow just along the edge, because the edges often are shadowed. But we've got quite a big overlap here, and I'm going to pop shadow there around that overlap just to tie that together. Okay, let me use the paler one here around the edges, and then I can go back and use the darker one just around the edges too. Because the paper's wet with the lighter colour, alcohol marker, this will blend quite easily now. Just add a little bit more because it has dried off in places. This one's going to be a bit more challenging. I want to add shadow underneath here, so I'm using my darker shadow because I want to feel this is lifted off a little bit. I'm going to add some shadow there. I'm also going to add some shadow under there, a little bit on the sides, same here, and a fair amount here as it overlaps. And I do want quite a bit of the darker colour there. And then around here and here, I'll just add some of the lighter colour just to soften this. This will need some shadow, as will the edges there, I think. So just do that. Okay, so these ones, I want the illusion that they are dipped in, and that means I'm going to put the shadows towards the top of these sections. Now part of me knows I could very easily intensify these shadows. I use a darker grey, which would have been actually quite a good idea because the illusion works better that way. But I can just go back with this one and add some more of that colour, and it will do the same thing. I also need to make sure that I add shadow to this seed pod in the similar way we've done the others, so around the edges like so, and perhaps here I want a darker shadow because it will be a cast shadow from the overlying object, and yes, it's shadowed into the that inner dip, but we'll work around that one. Now for these, I'm going to start by adding the shadow around the outside edge, like so, and this one here. And let me just blend this with some of the lighter grey. Just make sure we've got that. And these ones, I want to have them so they appear they are quite dimensional, and they'll be sticking up above this seed pod. So I'm going to put quite a bit of shadow towards the bottom, I'm going to leave an area where there's no grey as a highlight. This one here on the, that's under here, I am going to go and get a slightly darker grey because there's not enough contrast for this to work really. And this is only glazing so much, so let me just do that. So I hope, well, I've had some lovely comments from you people. Thank you so much. You're so kind, and I find it amazing, you know, that you're finding this interesting and you want to take part and using things, learning from me. It really does amaze me in more ways than you can imagine. I don't want cool grey 5, that would be too much. There's not a 3. I've got cool grey. I've got a number 1 and number 2, and there's not a number 3, so I'm going to have to go with a number 4. But it may work out fine. So that means I can actually intensify the shadows where I want them, particularly in these areas, because I really want to bring out that dimensionality here. And I'm just putting them in like so, and then I'll use the middle grey just to blend them out just a little bit. Like so. So much on those ones, and then I'll go to the lightest grey that I've got and use that just to add that shadow in and soften the blending again a little bit. So that'll work, I think. I think that'll work, and I can see how pale the shadows are on these ones. So I think I may just go to the edges a little bit and perhaps add that darker grey. It's always hard for me to know how dark a grey or these alcohol markers will dry. Even though I swatch them on paper, it does vary from paper to paper. And I will intensify that cast shadow as well, because that really helps to separate these from each other. So it can be quite hard to know exactly how dark they'll dry, and so it's really, I find it really useful to be quite light and cautious to begin with, because you can always add colour when it's alcohol marker. You can't always take it away. You can use the colourless blender as a bleach if you want, or to help with the blending if needed, but it's much better if I think that you don't in some ways. So I'm just using the lightest grey around the edges of these darker areas now, just to help blend them out just that little bit more. It will bleach the colour just a little bit, but I'll be fine with that. Okay, so I'm going to leave this to dry for a moment. I'll come back with colour because I do want to add some pattern to these. So with these ones, I'm going to do something a little bit different, where I'm drawing like a V shape there, and then I'm going to have a line down the centre of this one, and I am going to draw a little diamond in there, and I am going to colour that in black. So I want that pattern to be quite visible. And I think I might just add a stripe on each side. I try not to turn my paper around too much because I know how annoying it can be. Okay, let's add perhaps something like this. It's almost like a Zentangle crescent moon, but I'm going to add some lines here that will separate this lower area into two sections, and I am going to use line thickness to add some dimension here as well, or the suggestion that these are layers one over each other. And I'm going to thicken the line on the edge here and just make it a little bit bumpier, because that helps with that feeling we've actually got almost like rings around there. So that, I quite like that. This one, I think I'll just pop in just a simple stripe with a nice thick line on one side. That one's not very neat. This is what happens when I use a flexible nib pen. This is the first drawing I've done today. I haven't done any other yet. I did get 5 sketches for the next book done yesterday, so I'm awaiting feedback on those before I do much more, because it's a guide then whether I've got the right kind of style in mind. So it's always a back and forth between myself and the editorial team, and eventually go, yeah, okay, we're on the same page-ish, it's close enough, we'll count, you know, I'll get on with that. Problem comes when people feed me what do you call it, reference images, because then I get it stuck in my head that, oh, this is exactly what they want, but I can't do that, and I get very frustrated. And eventually I work things through in my own way, but it can get frustrating for me at times, and I'm sure it's frustrating for them. But we'll see. Okay, so that one, I did the same kind of thing here, but with a double border, and I popped some lines in there. And I think with this one, I may just pop some little circles in. Wishing now I'd picked up one of my other pens here, one of the fine liners to do this with. I love the Fudenosuke pens, but not so much for tiny details, because a tiny bit of pressure changes the thickness of the line so much. That's nice, but I think it would look nicer. Yeah, now that makes me happy. It does, that does make me happy. Okay, and then perhaps for this one, you can only see part of this, but I can draw shapes in there. So I'm basically putting these elongated arches in to add pattern there, and I am going to thicken the lower part of these to suggest they are on top of, and I can actually make little bump outs here on the edge. They're not perfect. So if I was going to do this in a drawing, I'd actually draw that in pencil first, put those shapes in, and then draw the outline. But here it's enough to remind me that this is perhaps what I need to do, and it's enough to see what that does. This looks a bit odd here to me. That feels better. Just that little bit just to finish it off. Okay, what about these shapes here? Well, we're going to have a collection of them. They do remind me a bit of sea squirts. And sea squirts have an open end. So I've done that by, I'll show you on a another piece of paper. You get my scrap paper. So I've got, I'll do it nice and big so you can see what I did. So I've got this shape going on. So I've popped this in so it looks like it's a nice oval shape. I've put a second band in there, but then I've gone in here and popped a band there. Actually, perhaps should have been, you can always adjust it. And then if I add lines in there, it adds that darkness and it ends up looking a lot more like we have a hole. I know what the problem with this is. It needs to follow the shape of this far more than it has done. But yeah, you get the idea. So it is practice. I seem to have done it okay there. And I'm going to put almost like little circles, but I'm not completing the top of them. It's like there's a little gap there. I'm trying to make the left hand side a little bit thicker. And the nice thing about these is they actually go to the edges quite nicely. So always go back and thicken those edges just that little bit. So these could be holes in, or just texture, little lumps and bumps. But leaving the top open, I find just adds a little bit of a difference. So that's quite nice. Okay, let's keep this idea of having the hole in the end, as it were, like so. And perhaps add some stripes. So I can never tire of stripes. Perhaps this one, like so. And then I'm going to use that central line as a place to tack something. I could have it almost like it's tucked under. I will fill that in there. It's a favourite thing I like to do, and I've forgotten about it until now. And overlapping little circular shapes, they look almost like scales. Now I'm going to thicken this edge. Very, very tiny. These are getting ridiculously tiny for adding details to. For this one, I'll put a dark circle in the centre. Do that there as well. And you can see how that just makes these appear hollow, as it were. So you can either have the band around it or do it like that, and it just works in the same kind of way. And for this one, I think I'm just going to put some vertical stripes in. This one, let's do some wobbly lines just to see how that looks. Because they're all different in that cluster, but I'm fine with that. That's fun. Okay, these are the last shapes, and I'm not entirely sure what I'm going to do here. I think what I'm going to do at the bottom of this one is create a kind of scaly pattern, but I'm only going to do it part way up. So fish scales on a plant, and then let's have a look at taking the centre of these up to the top to create that kind of shape or pattern. I actually quite like that. I think these could benefit from having those little bits of black at the bottom. It's that weight that just, I don't know. The added density of ink and the darkness just helps to bring that little bit of structure and form out. So that's quite nice. And then these ones on either side, what can we do here? I'm going to pop one of my favourite things. I talk about this, I have lots of favourite things, but that kind of almost seed-like shape is fun. But here I'm going to pop some double line in there, like that. So that's quite fun. And I think here, instead of circle, how about we pop in a very rounded triangular kind of shape. They look like eyes. This one looked like a finger, nail and finger, until now. So we've got those there like that. So that's quite fun. Okay, you can see how much this is all dried back now over here, and they're not as dark as they were. And that makes me confident in using this darker grey to begin with. I'm adding the darkest areas underneath these little bits here, and I'm going to add just a little bit of the dark grey in the centre. This is going to be challenging to do here because we have quite small drawings for alcohol markers, but I think I'll be able to do it. Here I want to add the darker shadow on this side, a little bit there, because I want a feeling that this here is sticking up a little bit, so I'll put some shadow underneath there. This one I'm going to go around here. We are going to have shadow here, there, and around here. I will do some on the edge there. I'm going to pop some there and some here. Perhaps a little bit just at the edges where they curl. So I did allow this darker grey to go over the edge of that white bit here in the inside, that V, upside down V shape. This one I'm going to put the shadow on it the same way I did for this one, where I'm putting the shadow to the right. And you can see what I'm doing. I'm trying to describe, but it's easier to see. Trying to lift these bands up somewhat. Big shadow here because it will be cast by that one in front of it. That's the easiest way to describe how to add shadows, is to imagine the item that is above it will put a shadow to the one below. And that's exactly what I'm doing here. So I've done these, so before I do anything else, let me just start to add lighter colours in, just to blend this out, these ones out just that little bit. And because the light colours are quite light, they will bleach the darker colour a little bit as well. It's best to do this while the alcohol inks are still damp, which is why I've taken a break to do this here and now, rather than going on to the next cluster. And I'll leave the next cluster because this is a bit like watching paint dry, or alcohol marker dry, I suppose. But the principles I'm using here are the same in the other one as well. Let me just pop the lid on that, get this one, and this is the lightest, so I'm using that to really blend that medium one and to get it will end up bleaching some of the colour out, which is what I really want, I think. So I may have gone over the top here. because the alcohol ink is still damp, it's hard to tell, as I've already said, is that it dries back so much. You look at these colours here and you can compare them with the ones that have already dried, and you can see how much they do dry back. I'll add some medium grey, the middle grey there that I've got. Okay, so I chose cool greys because the colours I picked out here are rather cool colours. This is most probably the warmest one, which is Mauve Shadow in the Ohuhus. It's R11. And I've got a pale blue violet, which is an R25. R for red, but this is a bluey colour. I don't even try to understand how people number the colours. I've tried. Each company has a different system, and they often actually don't make any sense to me, no matter how things are described. Okay, so I think this colour, the Mauve Shadow, is the lightest colour. So I'm going to fill sections in with this. Bear in mind, these will bleach, you must probably bleach the grey a little as well. And I'm going to use the other one to add, if I can get the lid off, the shadow too. So I've got my shadows already as a guide in place. And then just go back with the lighter colour just to blend this one out a little bit. And I'm also going to do the bottom part of the stem here. I think these colours, the mauvey, bluey purples, the soft colours, and the pale blues and the blue greens are some of my favourite colour combinations. And then I can also take, well, I could take a colours blender to lighten these up in the middle, but I've just remembered I've got my gel pen out, haven't I? So I can use my gel pen. Okay, so shadows on this one, because I'll leave this one for a moment. I'll let this dry a bit so we don't have any bleeding one to another. So I'm just going to pop my shadows in to this section, or these sections. Brush pens are great because as long as I'm light-handed, I should be able to leave those bands colourless and then come back and add colour to them. And I am using this colour to go right the way over that bluey colour so that I get a blend of the blues and the reds here. I may just add a little bit more of this at the top just to make sure. Again, this will fade back. Okay, I've only got two colours, but I'm still going to do the idea on this one of where the shadows lie. There go I with this colour first. And again, bearing in mind that I'm going to be using, oops, I went outside the line a little bit there, not a problem. I can fix that with a colours blender later on if I want to. So I'm just going to glaze the purpley pink that's there, or the blue with the purpley pink. I'm just going to add a bit more of that blue in where the shadows lie. And there we go. So we've got those. And I think I may just use these colours on this. So I'll pop these to one side because I want to change the colours I'm using. So let me have a look. This is mint blue, it's a pale bluey green, and this is the base colour, the lightest colour I'm going to use here. I just love this colour combination. I once had streaks put in my hair, this kind of colour, or colour combinations, the blues and purples and pinks actually, not quite the same. And, boy, did that cause me trouble at school. It's just a bit too strange for the pupils. put it that way, for some groups of pupils. And they made my life a bit of a misery, shall we say, for a while. Not with complaints or anything, but snide comments and name calling and so on. It's very unpleasant. No doubt if I'd been an art teacher, I'd have got away with it better, but as a science teacher, no. It's only a couple of classes. But there we go. That's in the past. Nowadays, well, my hair's au naturel. I'm not sure you needed to hear that, but you know. Let's just say, when you're a bit different in the world, and you're dealing with teenagers who just want to fit in, for the most part, it's wasn't always an easy situation for me to be in, because I'm quite happy in my quirkiness and difference. So, okay, what I did here as well, which I forgot to do with this one, is I did add some shadow underneath my little blobby bits. And I am going to go back with the darkest grey and just add a little bit more shadow around this to the left and underneath, just to lift these up a little bit. Now, these aren't looking exactly the most wonderfully dimensional at the moment. Everything's looking a bit on the flat side, but as they dry, things will change, I'm sure. And the addition of white and perhaps some pattern with another pen will help with this. So I've done all of those with the blue greys. Didn't want to do that. Okay, I want to try blue with some of the purpley pink. So I have got blue here. I've got a blue grey, which oddly is really quite blue, and I've got a sky blue, which is quite a bit darker. But they're the lightest blues in the set, which is very strange. There's such a big difference in tone between them. But let's have a look. Perhaps it's not so bad. So I am going to go back and forth with these and get them to blend while the paper is still rather damp. If you've got a fairly big, if you're using alcohol markers and you've got a fairly big difference in the intensity of colour, then this is the best way to get these two colours that are quite different to blend. I could do it if I had my chameleons out, but I haven't got those out. Just going to blend the edges. Go here. And blend edges. I think it's blues are the ones I always find the most difficult to blend, and I don't know why that is. I think it must have something to do with types of pigments that are used to get this blue colours, to be honest. Okay, I'm just adjusting how far out these shadowed areas go. That actually works quite nicely. And here I think I'll do these inner sections in blue. My biggest fear here is that this lightest colour, this blue-grey, will actually bleach all of this out just a bit too much. We'll see. We'll see. Let's just go back with this. Add it where it's bleached a little bit too much. Put it in a bit more. And I am bearing in mind that I can always add more intensity when at a later date. So this one, I don't want to do it the blue-grey. I don't really want to do it the other one. So let me have a look at get a different colour out there. Perhaps I'll go for the yellow greens that I used yesterday, because they're really like those. So the absinthe, that one, and I want sugarcane, hopefully. Okay, there it is. So pop that bag out of the way again. So let's have a look at that with these greens. Just something a bit different. The nice thing, I suppose, is it ties these in with the row above, is that I'm not on. It is sugarcane, it just looks a lot darker. That's because it will do, Angela, because they always look darker, and you've got grey on there, girl. Now these ones where I want them to appear as if they're holes dipping inwards, I'm making above them darker and just a little bit down the sides, just to suggest that we've got something raised there perhaps that's catching the light. And I've got the absinthe yet to do, so this is the one that will really add shadow around the edge. That's what I want. I'm going to add a little bit above the top as well, which I'll blend out with the other colours. So I'll go back to the medium colour and just use that to start to blend the absinthe out, which is quite a mossy yellow green, I suppose. It's still quite a nice cleanish yellow green. That's why I like alcohol markers a fair amount, is that they are quite clean colours. It does vary. And I like the transparency of them as well. So that looks all the one colour at the moment, but it will dry back. And I've got this to do here, so I think I'll start with the absinthe and blend from dark to light this time. So I think that would make quite a nice difference. Here, I'll add the medium green, leaving some space in the middle for the lightest green, so that'll be our highlights. And the nice thing about me using these is that we can see the difference that having 3 colours to blend out makes. And then the sugarcane in the middle. So that's quite nice there. Okay, pop those to one side. Now then, I've got an 01 pen here, and I do want to add some pattern, I think, to some of these. I'm not going to do every single one of them, I think, because I'd end up with something like this up here. But I do think I can add some kind of pattern and texture. So here I'm going to use the Zentangle Pattern Perk in the purple bands, I think. I'm going to start in the middle and have these little circular or squishy circular shapes stacked behind each other, sort of vaguely from the centre of each one outwards. Doesn't matter if it's not exact. So if somebody's if somebody comments on it, you just say, well, it was deliberate, I wanted it like that. So there we go, we've got those, and that adds interest, and it also adds that feeling of dimension. I think to help this, because this is still quite a fine pen, I'm just going to pop a band above and below these sections. This one already has a band below it, so I'm not going to do that. And here I'm just going to add some stippling. Stippling is the use of dots to create shadow but also texture. So I've put the dots really close together on the left hand side and underneath that band, but I'm leaving more space between them to the left. So that adds some interest there. I'm going to do the same with one of these. I think I'll just do one of these bands, and I'm going to fill this with shattuck. With this shattuck, I'm going to draw the first line solid, but the next line I'm going to leave a little break in, so it's like it's almost sparkling, or it's got some highlights there. I'm also going to create a black triangle at the base, because I think that extra bit of darkness will help, and I'm also going to thicken the zigzag line as well. So let's thicken that up, add that bottom triangle, and then add these lines in. Yeah, that's really does help with the definition of this pattern, and a little bit of an addition of volume, or dimension if you prefer to call it that. So at the edge where you've got a little area like here, you just carry on the pattern as if you'd drawn the next line, just fill it that way. That actually, I really like that. That's enough. That band there is enough. This one, I think I'm going to add some tipple to the top area, and perhaps at the base as well. I realise I haven't actually put any colour in the base, but that's fine. There we go. So that's enough, and perhaps I was thinking about putting perhaps some stripes in these ones and having the stripes wider where the colour is lighter, so closer together in the darker areas, and gradually getting wider to the highlighted areas and closer together again. That density of ink suggests shadow and form, and we perhaps can do the same here with that one. Not sure about that one. I think I'll leave that one as it is. These are going to be interesting because they are but I think what I'm going to do, this is going to be fun, possibly. I'm going to have these going this way, but hopefully I want this side to have a thicker line on the top to help us think that we've got a shadow going on. So I'm going to make use of those thicker lines, weighting those lines where I want this. Now I'm going to fill these with lines that are pointing upwards. Like so. So that creates a shadow there. With these, we also want to thicken these lines to the left and the bottom. So I could have done with drawing this in pencil and having these poking out a little bit or bumping out, but it's okay. And I think I'm just going to pop some dots to the bottom, just around the side a little bit, just to add shadow. Same with these, like so. Just get that shadow going on, so it's stippling around the bottom and left hand side, which would be in shadow if these are sticking outwards. And just going to thicken these lines towards the right hand side, just to make it look like they might be a bit thicker or darker in shadow that side as well. And then what I need to do, the last thing I'm going to do today, because I've spent nearly an hour, I can't believe that, an hour. I can actually, because I can talk for Britain and I can draw for Britain as well. It's the white gel pen time, so it's time for little highlights. The perks, I'm going to put white dots at the top. Tell you what, I've warmed to the use of white gel pens. For this one, I'm going to add them where I've got the breaks roughly in these lines. If they overlap the lines, I'm not too worried because it will add that sparkle. Here, I'm going to add them in the larger areas, just to add that brighter sense. And perhaps I'll add some where the lighter shades are in here, perhaps along the green ones, like so. And I can do that here, perhaps with an area of white. I'm not going to do the thinner bands I drew in. I'm going to leave them as they are, some contrast. But I'm also adding some white on the stem there, where there would be perhaps some highlights mixed in with the black dots as well, so there's that blending going on. Here I'm going to add some down the right hand side, and at the top I'm also going to add a little dot to each of these little sections. Just brightens things up. And then in these sections I'm putting rows of dots right down the centre of them, like so, just to lighten that up, which I think works nicely. Here I'm going to want some highlights around underneath these, which seems crazy, but if you think I've created a kind of lumpy bit or area that sticks up around these holes, then that makes sense. For this one, I'm going to put white dots in the area of this, each of these bumps that I haven't filled with black, but I'm going to concentrate them towards the top right edge. Not so many in the areas that are shadowed or the tiny places, but we get them. And perhaps just a couple up here, and perhaps on this one as well, where they would catch the light. Actually, this is creating, if I join these up and circle around these, it's creating quite an interesting kind of pattern going on there. And so there we are, that's as far as I'm going to go with you. The principles I've used for adding colour here are the same, just tidying some of these black lines up where I've missed with the gel pen. That's all. are the same as these. So I'll most probably carry on colouring these in and so on. And I'll show the finished one on social media later on today. So, or maybe about the same time as this gets posted. We'll see what happens. So until I see you again, take care. Have fun with these. Play with your favourite patterns. I haven't used Diva Dance here. I haven't used many of my other favourites. But work out for yourself what your favourite kinds of patterns are. You know, some of these would be fun in black and white squares, for example. I love a bit of black and white in amongst colour because it looks so clean and pristine, but it lightens the colours as well in some way. But have fun, be creative, and look after yourselves, and I'll see you soon. Bye-bye for now.